They say Texas heat can melt steel, but nothing seared me like the moment I handed Durant the power over my home. My husband Calder had just passed. Everything was blurred in those weeks. Between the funeral arrangements, the frozen bank accounts, and Isolde barely speaking, I made decisions I now replay with clenched fists. Durant stood there with that comforting, "I got you, sis" smile, holding the title transfer paperwork. "Just temporary," he said. "With probate and all, it's safer in my name until you get things settled. Trust me." So I trusted him. I trusted family. Weeks passed. Grief blurred into routine. Isolde returned to school. I picked up part-time hours at the library to keep busy. But Durant, he changed. Calls went unanswered. When I stopped by the house to water the roses Calder planted, the locks had been changed. I knocked, waited. Eventually, Durant opened the door, only halfway. "Miscommunication," he said flatly, eyes avoiding mine. "It's just, with the liability of everything. Better safe than sorry, right?" Behind him, a woman I'd never seen before walked by in my kitchen, her heels clicking across the tile I scrubbed clean every Sunday for over a decade. She looked right at me and smiled like she belonged there, like I never had. Something inside me frayed then. I tried to shake it off. Maybe Durant was overwhelmed too. Maybe this was still grief, just expressed differently. I told myself 100 stories, just to stay calm, but stories can't shield you from reality. The reality hit a week later. Isolde and I returned from the grocery store, arms full, sweat dotting my back. I climbed our front steps, and the key didn't fit. I jiggled it, tried again. Then I heard a voice. "Ma'am, step away from the door." 2 officers stood on the lawn. Durant stood behind them, holding a folder. "She no longer resides here," he told them. "I have legal authority over the property." I laughed. At first, a dry, confused laugh. "This is my house," I said. "My daughter's childhood was built in that living room." One officer stepped between me and the door. "There's paperwork. He's the registered owner." I turned to Durant. "Are you serious? This is how you treat family?" He sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "Mireya, you've been unstable since Calder passed. Isolde needs stability." "You're calling me unstable?" Neighbors peeked out from their windows. One of them, Mrs. Ellison, held her phone up, recording. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my chest. I looked at Isolde. Her arms full of paper bags, her eyes wide, stunned. She didn't cry. She didn't blink. We ended up on the curb, groceries around our feet. Cars drove by like it was a normal day. I sat there, quiet, while shame wrapped around me like wet wool. The worst part? Durant didn't even flinch. He closed the door, turned the lock, and disappeared. That night, the video went viral on a local Facebook group. The caption read, "Woman causes scene at her brother-in-law's home, claims it's hers." "They always say blood is thicker than water," I muttered, scrolling. "Until it's time to divide the estate." But I wasn't broken. Not yet. He took my house. He wasn't going to take my dignity. I went to charge my phone at the gas station across from the motel we checked into. When it powered back on, there was a new voicemail, a woman's voice, calm, steady. I saw what Durant did. "You're not crazy. Call me back." The message replayed in my head all night. "You're not crazy. Call me back." I sat on the motel bed, staring at my phone, thumb hovering over the call button. Something about the woman's voice had settled under my skin. I wanted to believe her. I wanted it to be real. But these days, trust was a currency I could no longer afford to spend lightly. Just as I worked up the nerve, the screen went black. Dead battery. Of course, I didn't say a word, but Isolde quietly reached into her backpack and handed me her old power bank. No questions, just a nod. It was her way of saying, "I see you, Mom." Morning came with more heat than it had any right to. We were still living out of our car, half our groceries wilted in the back seat. I was sipping a gas station coffee when a familiar black SUV pulled up to the curb of our old house. Durant stepped out, flanked by 2 officers. I stood up instinctively. "Ms. Patterson," one officer began, clipboard in hand, "we're here to formally enforce the transfer of property. Mr. Sterling has full legal ownership." Durant didn't look at me. His sunglasses stayed on. His tone was measured, almost bored. She's been unstable since Calder died, he said, voice flat as paper. The house needed peace. My niece deserves that. I nearly laughed from the absurdity. Unstable? You mean grieving? Mourning a man I loved for over 20 years? Ma'am, the officer cut in, we're not here to discuss family dynamics. The locks had already been changed. Again. My name, our life, had been wiped clean from the mailbox. The porch, once cluttered with Isolde's paint projects, now displayed potted succulents and some tacky metal sign, "Home is where the wine is." We watched it all from the car, again. This time, Isolde didn't even flinch. She just stared ahead, eyes unfocused. I didn't cry either. My body was too tired for that. Instead, I felt something colder settle in, the stillness before the storm. Later that week, I went to Isolde's school to update her contact information. New address, new number, new everything. I dreaded walking into that office, but someone had to hold the pieces together. Seraphine West, the school counselor, greeted me with a smile that felt like a hug from a snake. Mireya, so sorry for everything. Transitions are hard. I handed over the paperwork without much small talk. She skimmed through, nodding. You know, she said softly, Durant's always had a good heart. I'm sure things will stabilize soon. You'll bounce back. I froze. I didn't mention Durant, not once. She blinked, just a little too fast, then forced a laugh. Oh, sorry, just assuming. He's mentioned you. In meetings. Nothing major. I left that office with one conclusion. The woman supposedly looking after my daughter's mental well-being was sleeping with the man who stole our home. That night, I found Isolde asleep on the motel bed, laptop open beside her. Normally, I'd close it gently. This time, something caught my eye. A folder on the desktop. Durantcom. I clicked it. The screen went blue. A warning flashed. Access denied. Admin login only. I closed the laptop as soon as Isolde walked into the room. She paused in the doorway, her expression unreadable. I'll handle it, she said quietly, placing a grocery bag on the desk like we were just two people living a normal life. I didn't ask what she meant. Lately, she spoke in codes I wasn't sure I was meant to crack. The next morning, I tried to register her for SAT prep through a community college program. It was nothing fancy, just enough to help her feel she had a future waiting. But the card declined. I tried again. Same result. I logged into the account we'd been building since she was 4, scraping together every refund, every birthday check from Calder's parents. The screen flashed back. $0. Nothing. Gone. I scrolled through the transactions, heart pounding, until one caught my eye. Property deposit, Seraphine W. I had to read it twice. Seraphine. The school counselor. The woman who told me Durant had a good heart. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I sat Isolde down later that day. I told her about the fund, the withdrawal, the name on the transaction. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. I figured as much, she said. You knew? I guessed. They're not very smart, Mom. Just smug. She stood up and walked to her room. I heard the click of her door closing and the muffled thud of her backpack hitting the floor. No yelling, no breakdown, just a wall slowly being built. Later that evening, a former friend from our old neighborhood texted me a link. Thought you'd want to see this. It led to a website, sleek, pastel-colored with soft font, from pain to power, coaching for women in transition. There she was, Seraphine, in my dining room. She was standing where my wedding photo once hung. The site featured testimonials from clients and before and after shots, one of which was clearly Isolde's old study nook, our bookshelves. Our window. I felt bile rise in my throat. There were quotes about resilience and rebirth. Women like us don't break, we bloom, one caption read, under a picture of Seraphine sipping wine at the patio table Durant and I picked out on our 15th anniversary. They weren't just erasing us. They were repackaging us. I didn't say anything to Isolde. I didn't have the words. What could I say that didn't sound like another failure? That night, after she fell asleep, I walked into her room to shut off the lamp. On her desk was a printed document. Neatly clipped. No title. Just one line at the top. Refund requested. $75,000. Under review. At the bottom, it said, "Filed by E. Patterson." I didn't expect to see my name on a legal form again, not after everything Durant had erased. Yet there it was, printed bold across a refund request my daughter had filed behind my back. When I asked her about it, she didn't flinch. "If they used our names, they left a trail," she said calmly, like she was explaining math homework. Then she disappeared into her room again, shutting the door like it was a final verdict. I sat alone in that motel kitchenette, staring at the paper until my eyes blurred. She was right, of course. Someone always leaves fingerprints. But when did she become the one tracking them? 2 days later, a thick yellow envelope landed in our mailbox. No return address, no markings. I opened it slowly, half expecting another slap in the face. Inside were 3 things: a scanned, notarized copy of Calder's original will, naming me and Isolde as sole beneficiaries, a printout of Durant's forged version, and a single sticky note. "He didn't expect you to find this. You should have." My heart caught somewhere between fury and relief. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, will in one hand, the note in the other, and time rewound without my permission. Back to the funeral. I was still in black, barely breathing. Durant had pulled me aside, voice soft but firm. "Let me handle the documents, Maria. You're not in the headspace to sort this." I remembered nodding, numb. He slid a folder toward me. I signed where he pointed. I never even read the pages, and now I knew what I'd signed away. My house, my daughter's future, my name. I didn't cry. I stood. I folded the real will and tucked it into my purse like it was a weapon. The next day, I visited a legal aid clinic at the church down the street. No frills, just fluorescent lights and women with stories more jagged than mine. I didn't bring Isolde. This step was mine alone. The attorney was a petite woman named Carol, who wore her reading glasses like armor. She studied the documents without speaking, then looked up and nodded slowly. If the signature was obtained under duress, or during a period of known cognitive vulnerability like grief, it may be considered invalid, she said. And if the original will was deliberately hidden, we're talking about fraud. The word hit different when said aloud. Fraud, not betrayal, not family drama, fraud. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Carol leaned forward. "Do you still have access to the house, even for a moment?" I paused. "I might. Why?" She glanced at the folder. "Because men like Durant never stop at one lie. If he forged documents, there's a good chance he hid the rest somewhere he thought you'd never look." I nodded, standing slowly. "Then it's time to look." We drove past our old house just after sunset, the streetlights flickering on one by one like a slow reveal. The yard was lit up like a wedding reception, white balloons tied to chairs, string lights wrapped around trees, people clinking glasses under a banner that read, "Valor Edge Launch Mixer." I didn't say a word. Isolde pulled out her phone and snapped a photo through the windshield. "He's selling a lie," she murmured. "Let's make sure someone buys the truth." The next morning, I sat in the library's back corner, hunched over a donated laptop. The local podcast Durant had just appeared on was trending. The Reclaimed Legacy. There he was, on camera, trimmed beard, soft blue shirt, that careful pause before every sentence he rehearsed in the mirror. I stepped in when my brother passed, took guardianship, restructured the estate, and gave my niece a better shot at life. He had the audacity to make it sound noble, like I'd been some hurricane he'd heroically survived. My hands clenched the armrests, knuckles white. Back at the motel, Isolde was silent for most of the evening. At one point, I caught her dragging folders to her laptop desktop, branding mock-ups, spreadsheet files, screenshots. I didn't ask. I just watched. Around 3 in the morning, I heard the soft tap-tap-tap of keys. The glow from her screen cast a pale ring around her. She looked calm, surgical. The next day, the internet exploded. A site appeared, identical to Durant's startup page, but every tab redirected to evidence. Forged signatures, will comparisons, screenshots from Seraphine's self-promotional website, and a side-by-side of the mentorship contract Durant issued with Isolde's name digitally spliced onto it. The header read, "Stolen startup, when your legacy is built on a lie." The comments section blew up. Local journalists reposted the link. Some of Durant's investors began issuing statements. That afternoon, I got a call from the church legal clinic. Carol didn't say hello. "They're panicking," she said. "3 backers pulled out this morning. One firm is considering a fraud investigation." There was a pause. "He left you a voicemail, didn't he?" I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I played it back later. Durant's voice cracked halfway through. "Mireya, this has to stop. Whatever you and Isolde are doing, you're burning everything down. You'll ruin me. For what? Some misplaced grudge?" I deleted it before it ended. That evening, a new email landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple. Urgent. Deposition prep. The message read, "We're preparing for formal deposition next week, but you need to get back inside that house. There may be more we haven't uncovered." I walked into the church legal clinic the next morning with a folder under one arm and a headache brewing behind my eyes. Carol was already waiting, a thin smile on her face, glasses perched like usual. "The court accepted the preliminary filings," she said without preamble. "We're on the record now." Durant's lawyer had responded in less than 12 hours with thinly veiled threats, a formal notice to cease public defamation, and a request to delay discovery. Typical. But they didn't know about the email I received. Check the safe. Calder kept backups. Backups of what? 2 days later, armed with a court order and a sheriff's escort, I stood again at the doorstep of the house I once called mine. Seraphine answered, clearly startled, wearing a satin robe far too smug for 9 in the morning. I wasn't informed of any visit. I handed her the paperwork. The sheriff said, "She has legal authority to retrieve personal property." She didn't say another word. Just stepped back. Walking into that kitchen felt like stepping into a wax museum version of my life. It looked the same. Countertop I cleaned 1,000 times, cabinet door still slightly crooked, but it was soulless, like everything human had been vacuumed out and replaced with catalog furniture and wine quotes. I didn't linger. I knew where I was going. Calder's study had always been his space. I hadn't stepped foot in it since the funeral. The air smelled like aged paper and quiet grief. Behind the bookshelf, just where I remembered, was the small wall safe he installed years ago. Code? I didn't even hesitate. His birthday. It clicked open on the first try. Inside, neatly stacked, a copy of the original will, notarized, several bank statements, some of them with Seraphine's name tied to unauthorized withdrawals, and tucked into a hard plastic case, a thumb drive labeled simply, Study Cam. Back at the clinic, Carol plugged it into her laptop. The footage loaded slowly, but when it did, there was no mistaking the scene. Durant, standing in that same room, wearing the same smirk I now saw in nightmares. "She'll never see this," he whispered as he placed the forged documents into the safe. Minutes later, a younger Seraphine entered, hair longer, eyes sharper, handing him a check labeled Education Trust. They laughed. Carol leaned back, her voice low and final. "They didn't just manipulate you. They conspired, documented it, and left evidence of intent. We have everything we need for criminal charges." I nodded slowly, but the weight didn't lift. Isolde stood behind us, arms folded. I turned to her. "We can move forward now." She didn't answer. Her gaze drifted away, distant and unreadable. Isolde didn't flinch. She didn't even blink when Carol paused the footage, when she leaned in and said, "We have everything we need." My daughter just stood there, arms folded, eyes sharp. I expected relief, maybe pride, but what I saw was calculation. "They didn't just steal money," she said later, as we rode home in silence. "They stole our silence. So I took theirs." 2 days later, Durant stood on stage at a Chamber of Commerce banquet, bathed in light, the crowd clapping politely. A banner behind him read, "Celebrating community resilience and family leadership." The irony made my stomach turn. Seraphine sat in the front row, her hands folded, looking like the portrait of second chances. I watched it all through a live stream someone posted to Facebook. The comments started rolling in before his third sentence. Isn't this the guy from #stolen startup? Didn't he take money from his niece's college fund? Look at that woman beside him. Counselor or co-conspirator? And then the real bomb dropped. A feature article on a national news blog titled, "Founder Built on Lies," paired with a side-by-side of Durant's speech and the leaked video from Calder's study. The thumbnail alone told the story. His smug whisper, the forged documents, the moment Seraphine handed him that check labeled Education Trust. Mid-speech, Durant's voice cracked. He fumbled with his notes. Phones in the audience glowed like tiny torches of exposure. One by one, sponsors pulled out. Investors began issuing no-comment statements. By the time he left the podium, the applause was gone. That night, I sat on the motel bed, the TV muted, a quiet hum filling the silence. Isolde was scrolling on her phone with the focus of someone managing a storm. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice. Calm. Hesitant. You don't know me, but I processed the wire transfer for Durant last fall. I was the mid-level compliance officer. I sat up straighter. He forged the grant documentation, he said. He marked the trust as dissolved to justify the release. It didn't sit right with me then, but now I understand. I'm willing to testify. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the wall. The kind of silence that follows truth isn't quiet. It's charged. Alive. Later that night, I turned to Isolde. She was lying on her stomach, reading. We may not get everything back, I said. She didn't look up, just smiled faintly. We already took back the truth. My phone buzzed again. New email. Subject line. You're invited to the wedding of Durant Sterling Seraphine West, RSVP to confirm attendance. The wedding invitation landed in my inbox like a dare. A pastel digital card, elegant cursive font, gold trim that tried to pass for grace. You're invited to celebrate the union of Durant Sterling Seraphine West. The RSVP button shimmered when I hovered over it. I stared at it for a long time. Isolde sat beside me on the motel bed, laptop balanced on her knees, typing with that same detached focus she'd carried through every storm. We RSVP in our own way, I said. That night, we built it together. The email, the archive, the schedule. We chose our words carefully, not with spite, but with precision. It was never about vengeance. It was about clarity. Justice in plain text. On Saturday morning, while I folded laundry in the motel's shared kitchenette, Isolde hit send. Durant's wedding began under a velvet sky at some rented vineyard in the hill country. The kind of place where people sip mimosas and pretend bad things only happen to other families. Seraphine walked down the aisle in a backless gown, all smiles and borrowed diamonds. Durant beamed. Press, investors, and school board officials filled the rows. The officiant raised the mic. Does anyone here have reason these two should not be joined? Right then, every phone in the crowd buzzed. An email, subject line. Before you say I do, read this. Attached were the documents, bank records, forged signature comparisons, the notarized will, a video from the study cam showing Durant stuffing files into the safe, and a link to the Mirror startup site that had gone viral weeks earlier. People started whispering, then standing, then leaving. The officiant stepped back, confused. Seraphine looked like she'd been slapped. Durant tried to speak, something about sabotage, but the words didn't come. By evening, my voicemail was full. Maria, Durant's voice broke. You've made your point. Please, this isn't just ruining me, it's ruining everyone around us. Seraphine's sobs filled another message. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't listen to the rest. I deleted them all. Instead, I logged on to the legal aid portal and filed the final paperwork securing Isolda's educational trust in my name. No more loopholes. No more back doors. That night, while Isolda was brushing her hair in front of the mirror, I said, "You know, I didn't get the house back." She met my eyes in the glass. "No," she said, "but you got yourself back." A week later, I sat in the back row of the school auditorium as Isolda stepped onto a stage. She was the youngest panelist at the district's Youth Digital Security Conference. Her slide presentation flashed behind her, whistleblowing, "When silence is no longer protection." She spoke calmly, confidently, not about revenge, but about responsibility. About what happens when the adults meant to protect you become the ones you have to protect yourself from. And for the first time in months, I felt something clean settle in my chest. Not peace, not yet, but certainty.